Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back to a time without streetlighted, without smartphones, without much of anything you'd recognize. We're stepping into the quiet, murky world of medieval Europe. It's a world where the biggest excitement of your day might be a pig not eating your laundry, and honestly, if you were dropped there right now, you'd probably be terrified by the sheer, oppressive darkness, or the smells. Let's not even start on the smells. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see our little community scattered across the globe, all settling in for the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sound of a single, solemn bell tolling from the stone church tower slices through the silence. You lie still on your straw-stuffed mattress listening. It's midnight. You don't need a clock on the wall to tell you that you feel it in your bones, in the deep, cold stillness that has settled over your village. The fire in the central hearth has been banked for hours, reduced to a soft, orange glow of embers that does little to fight the damp chills seeping through the wattle-and daub walls of your small hut. You share this single room with your entire family. The soft, rhythmic breathing of your husband beside you, the occasional sleepy sigh from the small lump of blankets in the corner where your children are curled together for warmth. Outside, there is nothing but an immense, profound blackness. The darkness here isn't just the absence of light, it's a physical presence. It presses against the walls and the single shuttered window, muffling the world. The only sounds are the ones you know intimately. The rustle of straw as someone shifts in their sleep, a distant dog barking at the moon, the mournful hoot of an owl in the woods that border the fields. That bell, it's your clock. It's your calendar. It's the voice of God and the voice of your Lord, all in one. It tells you when to pray, when to wake for the day's labor, when to break your fast. For a world that is largely unable to read, sound is everything. And this particular bell, the midnight one, serves a double purpose. It marks the hour for the monks in the nearby priory to rise for their matins prayers, but for you, for the villagers, it's also a reminder of the curfew. This is a fascinating little detail of medieval life, the couvre-feu, which literally in Old French, it was a very practical rule. The bell was a command to make sure your domestic fire was safely covered for the night. In a world built of wood, thatch, and dry animal dung, a single stray spark from a hearth could turn an entire village into an inferno in a matter of minutes. So you listen to the bell not just as a timekeeper, but as a confirmation that all is as it should be, that every household is sealed against the night, both from the cold and from the danger of its own warmth. But as the last echo of the bronze bell fades into the night, another feeling surfaces. It's an anxiety that the darkness seems to amplify. Historians and folklorists still argue about what people like you truly feared in this profound, pre-industrial darkness. Was it the supernatural? The tales of demons, mischievous fairies, or lost souls said to roam the earth after sundown, seeking to lead good Christians astray? Or was it the more practical, more tangible fears? The fear of a hungry wolf pack venturing too close to the village edge, the fear of a desperate thief, or even the fear of a neighbor with a grudge, using the cloak of night to settle his score. For most, it was likely a jumble of all these things. The line between the natural and the supernatural was blurry, almost non-existent. A strange noise in the woods could just as easily be a demon as it could be a badger. But tonight, as you lie here, the usual fears of the dark feel distant. They've been replaced by a different kind of anxiety, one that's quieter, more personal, and far more persistent. It's a worry that has been coiling in the pit of your stomach for weeks, a secret that feels heavier and more dangerous than any ghost story the village elders tell. It's a fear born not of the dark world outside, but of a change happening within your own body. You count the days by the cycles of the moon, and the moon has cycled one too many times without the familiar sign that all is well. You shift ever so slightly on the rustling straw, a tiny movement that feels monumental in the crushing silence. The fear you feel isn't an abstract dread of the dark or of things that go bump in the night. It has a sound, the quiet grumble of a stomach that is rarely, truly full. It has a texture, the coarse, twice-mended wool of your children's tunics. It has a weight, the invisible, but immense pressure of survival, another life. It sounds like a blessing, a gift from God. And perhaps for a queen in her castle, it is. But for you in this one-room hut, huddled against the edge of a lord's vast estate, it's a terrifying calculation. Your gaze drifts to the corner where your children sleep, a small pile of humanity entangled for warmth. They are good children. Your eldest, a boy, is almost old enough to be a real help in the fields, his small hands learning to bind sheaves and scare crows. Your daughter is learning to spin thread, her movements still clumsy but full of intent. They are your joys, your purpose. But they are also a constant drain on your meager resources. You think of your daily meal, the pottage, a thin, simmering stew of whatever is on hand, oats or barley, a few peas or beans from your small garden plot, perhaps an onion or a wilted turnip from the root cellar. Meat is a rare luxury, a taste reserved for feast days or, if you're lucky, a rabbit's nared in the woods, an act of poaching that could cost you your hand if you were caught. Every bite of food is a product of back-breaking labor on land that isn't even yours. You are serfs, bound to this soil, to this manor. You work the Lord's fields 3 days a week, and only then can you tend to the small strip of land He allows you for your own sustenance. Another child means another share of that already thin pottage must be ladled out. Another body to clothe, which means more wool to spin, more thread to weave, or more goods to trade for cloth you cannot make. And for the first few years, it's a body that only takes. It cannot work, it cannot contribute. It can only cry with hunger. It means you, its mother, will be weakened from childbirth, unable to perform your share of the heavy labor in the fields during the crucial planting or harvesting seasons. The hungry gap, that desperate time in late spring when last year's grain stores are gone and the new crops have yet to ripen, would become even more treacherous. It's a fragile, precarious existence. You saw it just last year with John Fletcher's family. When he died of a sudden fever, the Lord's Reeve came to collect the Hewitt tax. This is a particularly cruel piece of medieval economics, a death duty. The Lord is entitled to claim the deceased tenant's best animal. The Reeve took the Fletchers on the ox. In a single afternoon, his widow and children lost their most vital farming tool, the key to ploughing their strip of land. Their ruin was swift and total. The thought makes you shiver. Your family has one cow. A single precious cow. Everything you have is balanced on a knife's edge. Another child is another weight pressing down on that blade. Historians and sociologists centuries from now will debate the nature of parental love in your time. Some will argue that with infant mortality rates so brutally high, where a third of children might not live to see their 5th birthday, parents like you developed a sort of emotional detachment, a defense mechanism against inevitable grief. They'll say you saw your children more as future laborers, as economic units, rather than as cherished individuals in the modern sense. But others will fiercely disagree, pointing to carvings on tombstones and desperate prayers in parish records as proof of a deep and abiding love. As you look at the sleeping forms of your own children, you feel the debate is foolish. The love is there, the fierce, burning coal in your chest. You would throw yourself in front of a wild boar for them without a second thought. But the cold, hard truth of your world is that love cannot fill an empty stomach. Love cannot replace a lost ox. Love cannot pay the tithe to the church or the taxes to the Lord. And so, the love you feel is tangled up with a terrible practical fear. The confirmation of another life growing inside you wouldn't just be a personal joy, it would be a family crisis. It would be a secret that, if not managed, could unravel the thin, frayed rope by which you all hang on. And that is why the silence of the night feels so heavy. The quiet in the hut is the quiet of a pot about to boil over. The secret sits inside you, heavy and sour. It's a secret not just from your husband, who would likely see it as God's will and simply resign himself to the hardship. It's a secret from the priest, who would thunder from the pulpit about the sanctity of life and the damnation that awaits those who interfere with God's plan. And it's a secret from the entire village, a place where privacy is a concept that doesn't really exist. Your life is an open book. Everyone knows everyone else's business. They know how many chickens you keep, whether your grain harvest was good or bad, and they can tell by the look on your face if you've had a quarrel with your spouse. The small, clustered huts offer no sound plumbing. A raised voice, a bout of coughing, the cry of a newborn, all are public information. Women wash clothes together at the riverbank, their chatter a constant flow of news and gossip. Men work side by side in the fields, their conversations drifting on the wind. To have a secret in a place like this is to carry a lit candle in a gale. You know you cannot keep it for long. Soon, the sickness in the mornings will become undeniable. Your shape will change, a slow, inevitable betrayal by your own body, and the questions will begin. First, the knowing glances from the other women. Then, the cheerful yet probing comments. A blessing from the Lord is on its way, is it? They'll say, their eyes sharp, calculating, and you will have to smile and nod, all while your heart hammers against your ribs with a frantic, trapped rhythm. This is the genesis of your quest. It isn't a grand adventure or a noble pursuit. It is a desperate, silent scramble for a solution to a problem you can't even name out loud. The word for what you are seeking, a way to stop a pregnancy, or to end one that has just begun, is not spoken in polite company. It is whispered. It is a sin, a crime, and a dark art all rolled into one. To even think it is to court damnation. To act on it is to risk everything. The knowledge you seek is not written down in books, at least not any you could ever access. The great libraries are locked away in monasteries, filled with Latin texts penned by celibate men whose understanding of your body is purely theoretical, and frankly, often wildly incorrect. The physicians who read these books serve kings and wealthy nobles, not the wives of serfs. Their knowledge is a world away from your reality. You've heard of their theories of the four humors, of the body being a microcosm of the universe, of women being colder and moister than men and therefore inherently weaker and more irrational. It's all nonsense to you. You know your own strength. You know the heat of the summer sun on your back as you work, and the deep, biting cold of winter. So where do you turn? You turn to the other library, the one that exists only in memory and spoken words. This is the knowledge passed down from mother to daughter, from neighbor to neighbor. It is a messy, unreliable collection of folklore, herbal remedies, and outright superstition. It's the kind of knowledge that academic historians will later call folk medicine or popular magic, and they will spend centuries trying to untangle its thread. They'll debate whether these practices were a form of early science, a vestige of pre-Christian pagan beliefs, or simply the desperate gambles of the powerless. You don't have the luxury of such academic distance. For you, this is not a topic of debate, it is a lifeline. You have to find someone who holds a piece of this forbidden knowledge. Someone who has listened to the whispers and remembered them. Someone who knows which plants to pick and when. Someone who understands the difference between a remedy that might work and one that will surely kill you. This is why your secret is so dangerous. It's not just about the potential for divine punishment or social shame. The act of seeking this knowledge is, in itself, an act of rebellion. It puts you on the fringes of your own community, marking you as someone who is willing to step outside the bounds of what is known and accepted. It's a path that leads away from the church bell and the priest's sermon, and towards something older, wilder, and much less certain. As you lie there, feeding the first faint stirrings of a life you cannot afford, you make a decision. You will have to seek out one of the village's secrets, one of its outcasts. You will have to find the person who lives on the edge of the village, and on the edge of respectable society, the one they call the wise woman. The next few days are a masterclass in subtle reconnaissance. You can't simply ask, where does the woman who knows about forbidden herbs live? That would be like announcing your sin to the entire village with a trumpet. Instead, you listen. You listen with an intensity you didn't know you possessed, turning yourself into a human sponge for every scrap of gossip, every half-muttered complaint, every veiled comment that floats through the air. Your classroom is the mundane, everyday life of the village. You go to the communal well to draw water, your wooden bucket heavy on your arm. The well is the village nerve center, the place where information is traded as freely as water is drawn. Here, women gather, their voices a low hum. You linger longer than you need to, pretending to adjust the rope, all the while straining to catch fragments of conversation over the splash and creak of the pulley. They talk of everything, a cow that's gone dry, a dispute over a fence line, the upcoming Saints' Day festival. You listen for a name. An unusual name, a woman who is spoken of with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. You find more clues at the riverbank, where you join the other women to beat your family against the smooth grey stones. The work is hard, your knuckles rough from the cold water and harsh lye soap. But the rhythmic thwack of wet linen on rock is a perfect cover for conversation. Someone mentions a child with a persistent cough that the priest sprays cold and cure. Took him to old Ilara. A woman mutters to her neighbor, her voice dropping low, a poultice of mallow, and he was breathing easy by morning. The neighbor nods, but her expression is wary. Best be careful with her, she whispers back. The priest says her knowledge comes not from God. Delora. The name hangs in the air, charged with meaning. You file it away. You learn to read the silences. When a flock of crows lands ominously on a neighbor's thatch roof, someone makes the sign against evil and mutters about bad omens. Another scoffs, but a third woman glances nervously towards the woods at the edge of the village. Elora knows the meaning of such things, she says, and then the conversation quickly, awkwardly, changes. You see it. You see how her name is a boundary. To speak it is to acknowledge a power that exists outside the church walls, and that makes people uncomfortable. This reliance on oral culture is something that is difficult for a modern mind to truly grasp. For you, history isn't written in books, it's stored in the memories of the old. Law isn't in a codified document, it's in the customs recited by the village elders. And medicine, for you, is not a science of chemical compounds, but a messy, living tradition of stories about what worked for someone's cousin or what failed disastrously for someone's grandmother. Historians will forever be frustrated by this, because all traditions are like smoke, they shift, they change with every telling, and they rarely leave a physical trace. Was the poultice that cured the cough really made of mallow, or was it lung-worked? And did Elara add a secret prayer, a pagan incantation, while she mixed it? The truth is mutable, passed through the filter of a dozen different memories. You start to piece together a map, not of the village itself, but of its social landscape. You learn who is pious and would report any suspicious questions to the priest. You learn who is more pragmatic, more willing to bend the rules when it comes to the health of their livestock or their family. You listen for who complains the loudest about the tithes to the church, and who speaks of the old ways with a hint of nostalgia. These are your potential allies, or at least, the ones who are less likely to be your accusers. Slowly, a picture of Elara forms. She lives alone. Her cottage is the last one on the path that leads into the forest, deliberately set apart. She is a widow, but no one seems to remember her husband very clearly. She is old, but no one is quite sure how old. She is a healer, but her methods are suspect. She is, in the careful vocabulary of the village, a cunning woman, a wise woman. The term itself is ambiguous. It suggests a useful, practical knowledge, cunning in the old sense of knowing. But it also carries a shadow, a hint of something illicit, something that edges close to what the church calls witchcraft. You now have a name and a general location. But the most important piece of information is still missing: how to approach her. What is the protocol for seeking forbidden knowledge? What is the currency? Is it a few eggs, a loaf of bread, or something more? The wrong approach could lead to a flat denial, or worse, expose you. The path to her door is not just a physical one, it's a social and psychological one, and every step is fraught with peril. The decision to go is a cold knot of dread in your stomach. For days you've been turning it over in your mind, weighing the risks against the terrifying certainty of your situation. The morning sickness is no longer a gentle hint, it's a daily, wretched ordeal. You hide it as best you can, rushing outside as if to swab the pigs, your body heaving behind the small hazel grove at the edge of your yard. You choose your moment carefully. It has to be a time when your absence won't be immediately noticed or questioned. A market day is to public. A feast day is to communal. You settle on a regular afternoon when the men, including your husband, are out for the long stretch of work in the Lord's domain, not to return until dusk. Your children are occupied with simple chores near the hut. You can create a small window of time for yourself. You gather a small offering. This is a crucial part of the ritual, an unspoken language of exchange. You don't have coins, not in any meaningful amount. Your currency is what you produce. You take a half dozen of your precious eggs, wrapping them carefully in a bit of clean linen. You add a small, hard wheel of cheese you've been saving. It feels like a pitifully small offering for the enormous secret you are about to ask for, but it is a significant portion of your family's stored wealth. It is a sign of respect and desperation. Tucking the small bundle under your shawl, you murmur an excuse to your eldest child about gathering firewood from the copse, a plausible enough reason to be heading towards the woods. Your heart is a frantic drum against your ribs. Every step you take away from the familiar cluster of huts feels like you're walking into a different world. The path becomes less trodden. The sounds of the village, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of children fade behind you, replaced by the whisper of wind in the trees and the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. Finally you see it. Just as the rumors described, it's the last cottage. It sits in a small clearing, slightly hunched, as if tired of standing. The thatch on its roof is thick with moss, and a plume of grey smoke curls lazily from a hole near the peak. Unlike the other huts, which are clustered together for safety and community, this one stands in defiant isolation. Its garden is not the neat, orderly plot of a typical villager. Rosemary and many udont with strange leaves and unfamiliar flowers. The air here smells different, a mix of wood smoke and the sharp, spicy scent of herbs. For a long moment, you just stand there, hidden by the last line of trees, your courage failing you. This is the threshold. To cross it is to admit your secret to another soul. To cross it is to become complicit in a forbidden act. You think of the priest's face, his eyes blazing with righteousness as he preaches about the fires of hell. You think of your neighbors, their faces a mixture of pity and condemnation. If your secret were ever discovered, you could turn back now. You could walk back to your hut, accept your fate, and trust in God. You could birth the child and simply pray it survives, that you all survive. But then you think of the hungry gap. You think of the thin, watery pottage and the hollow look in your children's eyes at the end of winter. You think of the Fletcher family's stolen ox. Your fear of the future outweighs your fear of the present. You take a deep breath, the cool, earthy air filling your lungs. You step out of the woods and walk across the clearing. The ground is soft under your thin leather shoes. There is no formal door, just a heavy-looking flap of animal hide covering the entrance. You raise a trembling hand and knock softly on the wooden frame. Silence. For a heart-stopping second you think no one is there. Or worse, that you're being ignored. You are about to knock again, a little louder this time, when the hide flap is pulled aside. A woman stands in the dim doorway, silhouetted against the firelight from within. Old Laura. She is smaller than you expected, bent with age, her face a road map of wrinkles. But her eyes are not old. They are sharp, intelligent, and unnervingly clear. They take you in, from your worn-out shoes to your anxious face to the telltale bundle clutched in your hands. Her expression gives nothing away. It is neither kind nor cruel. It is simply knowing. You open your mouth to speak, to offer your carefully rehearsed excuse, but the words die in your throat. You just stand there, exposed and terrified, your secret laid bare in the unflinching gaze of the wise woman. Elara says nothing. She simply holds the hide flap open and gestures with her head for you to enter. You duck your head and step across the threshold, from the bright, open air of the clearing into a small, dim, smoky world. The inside of her hut is crowded and smells intensely of dried herbs, wood smoke, and something else, something vaguely metallic and medicinal. The space is a single room, just like your own hut, but the similarity ends there. While your home is defined by the tools of domestic life, a spinning wheel, cooking pots, sleeping pallets, cellar S is a workshop. Bunches of dried plants hang from the ceiling rafters like a strange, inverted forest. You recognize some chamomile, yarrow lavender, but others are completely alien to you. On rough-hewn shelves along the walls, there are clay pots, wooden bowls, and glass vials of a kind you've only seen once or twice in the possession of a traveling merchant. Everything is covered in a fine layer of dust and smoke. The air is thick, and the only light comes from the small, central fire and the slivers of daylight that pierce the walls. Elara lets the flap fall closed behind you, plunging the room into a deeper twilight. She gestures for you to sit on a low, three-legged stool near the hearth. You obey, perching nervously on the edge, your bundle of eggs and cheese still clutched in your lap. She moves to the fire, stirring a small iron pot that hangs over the flames. The contents bubble and release a pungent, slightly bitter steam. "You are John the Cooper's wife," she says. "It's not a question." Her voice is raspy, like dry leaves skittering across stone. You nod, surprised she knows your husband's trade. Though you suppose in a village this small, everyone's identity is tied to their function. "Yes," you manage to whisper, your voice barely audible. She doesn't turn from the fire. "Your eldest is a boy, sturdy. Your girl is 7, 8 winters old." 7, you say, a fresh wave of fear washing over you. Of course she knows. She sees everything. She is the village's unofficial archivist of births, deaths, and ailments. "And you carry another," she states, finally turning to look at you. Her sharp eyes seem to see right through your tunic, right through your skin to the tiny, unwelcome life taking root inside you. There is no point in denying it. The pretense falls away, leaving only the raw, ugly truth. Tears well up in your eyes, hot and shameful. You nod, unable to speak. You slowly, humbly, place your offering on the packed earth floor between you. Elara looks at the small bundle, then back at you. Her face remains impassive. This is the crucial moment, the real consultation. The exchange of goods is just the preamble. Now comes the exchange of truth. "The pottage is thin this year," she says, her gaze returning to the bubbling pot. "The Lord's levy was heavy. The rains came too late for the oats." She is not just making small talk about the harvest, she is showing you that she understands. She is naming the unspoken context for your visit. She knows this isn't about wickedness or a lack of morals. This is about the rain, the Lord, and the brutal arithmetic of survival. This is a point that many future chroniclers, especially those in the church, will miss entirely. They will record cases like yours as evidence of sin, of women's inherent moral weakness or susceptibility to demonic temptation. But they will fail to record the failed harvest that preceded it, or the punishing new tax, or the simple, devastating fact of an empty grain bin. The context is everything. You find your voice. We cannot manage another." The words come out in a choked sob. "Not now. It will break us." Elara listens, her head tilted slightly. She is the repository of these confessions. Generations of women in this village have likely sat on this very stool, their faces etched with the same fear, their voices whispering the same desperate plea. She is the keeper of the village's shadow knowledge, the curator of its secret sorrow. After a long silence, she shuffles over to one of the shelves and takes down a small, tightly lidded clay jar. She brings it back to the firelight, her gnarled fingers expertly prying it open. She tips a small amount of the contents, a mix of dark, chopped leaves and what look like tiny seeds, into her palm. "There are ways," she says, her voice slow and conspiratorial. "The old ways, not of the priest, not of God's books." She looks you directly in the eye, her gaze sharp and serious. "But the path is not a safe one. The plants do not always do as they are bid. They can be capricious. They can be angry." She is giving you your final chance to turn back. She is telling you that what you are asking for is not a simple transaction. It's a gamble, a dangerous bargain with forces you do not understand. The herbs in her hand are not just medicine, they are a form of magic, a volatile power that can heal or harm with equal indifference. Elara closes her hand over the herbs, a gesture that seems to seal your pact. "The safest ways are not of the garden," she rasps, her voice dropping even lower, becoming a dry whisper. "They are of the mind, of intent, of symbols." She gestures for you to lean closer, and you obey, the smoky, herbal scent of her clothes filling your senses. She is introducing you to the first and most peculiar layer of her knowledge, the world of magical talismans and sympathetic magic. "You need an object," she explains. "Something that carries a property you wish to have. Something barren. Something that cannot bear young." Her eyes gleam in the firelight. "The testicles of a weasel," she says, the words matter of fact, as if she were suggesting you add more salt to your soup. dried and sewn into a small leather pouch. You must wear it against your skin. The weasel is a cunning and sterile hunter in its heart. Its essence will persuade your womb to be the same. You stare at her, trying to process the sheer strangeness of the instruction. I weasel's testicles. The idea is so bizarre, so viscerally odd, that for a moment you're not sure if you heard her correctly. This is your first real immersion into the logic of folk magic, a logic that future anthropologists will call sympathetic. It's the belief that, like FX, to prevent fertility, you carry a symbol of infertility. It's a world where metaphor has physical power. Elara seems to read the confusion on your face, or the earwax of a mule. She continues unfazed. A mule cannot breed. Its barrenness is known to all. A small amount, wrapped in a scrap of red cloth worn as a bracelet. The reed is for protection. She points to a dark, dried husk hanging from a rafter. The foot of a hare. The hare is fast. It can outrun its fate. You must wear its foot so you might outrun yours. You look around the cottage hut with new eyes. You had seen it as a workshop and apothecary, but now you see it for what it truly is, a catalogue of strange and potent symbols. Every dried animal part, every strangely shaped stone on the shelf, every feather tied with colored string, they are not just objects. They are arguments. They are physical prayers, pleas to the natural world to bend its rules. There's a strange debate among historians about these magical objects. Were they pure superstition, a placebo for a terrified mind, or was there a deeper, now lost system of belief at play, a remnant of a pre-Christian worldview where the spiritual essence of a weasel or a mule was a tangible, transferable force? Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. For you, sitting in this smoky hut, the line between a placebo and a miracle doesn't matter, and Elara is offering it to you in these strange, unsettling forms. And there are stones, she says, shuffling over to a wooden box in the corner. She lifts the lid, revealing a collection of smooth, dark pebbles. She picks one up. It's a lodestone, a natural magnet. It can also pull the seed from a man's loins before it reaches the womb, she claims. Or if a woman is already with child, it can be used to pull the child out before its time. But that is a dark and dangerous working. She places the stone back in the box with a reverence that borders on fear. She explains the rituals. It's not enough to simply possess the object. You have to believe in it. You have to perform the ritual correctly. You must walk 3 times around a willow tree at sundown. You must spit into a running stream. You must never let another person touch your amulet, lest its power be diluted or stolen. The rules are as specific and as seemingly arbitrary as the priest's instructions for a holy sacrament. You feel a sense of vertigo, as if the solid ground of your reality has tilted. The world you thought you knew, the world of hard work, prayer, and predictable seasons, has a hidden layer, the secret operating system of symbols and rituals. This is the cunning of the cunning woman. It's a knowledge of the unseen connections, the secret sympathies that bind the world together. But a part of you, a practical, grounded part, is skeptical. Can a weasel's testicle really stop a life from forming? It seems too easy and too strange. The fear in your gut, the physical reality of your condition, demands something more tangible, something more medicinal. As if sensing your doubt, Elara's own shifts. These are the ways of persuasion, she says, her gaze hardening slightly. They ask the body to change its mind. But sometimes the body is stubborn. Sometimes it must be forced. She gestures towards the chaotic garden outside her door. And for that, she says, a new, more serious gravity in her voice, we must turn to the green things, to the garden, and that is where the real danger lies. Elara pushes aside the hide flap, and the sudden influx of afternoon light makes you blink. Come, she says, her voice leaving no room for argument. You follow her out of the smoky darkness of the hut and into the bewildering chaos of her garden. Standing in the middle of it, you realize it's not the untamed wilderness it appeared to be from a distance. There is a logic to it, albeit a strange one. Plants are grouped not by size or type, but seemingly by purpose. In one corner, you see a patch of familiar Friendly herbs you recognize from your own small kitchen garden: sage, parsley, and thyme, their scents comforting and domestic. These are the healers of common ailments. The so others of coughs and fevers, the season herbs of cottage. This is the public face of her knowledge, the part of her craft that is accepted, even valued by the village. But Alara leads you past this section to a part of the garden that is shoddier, wilder. The plants here look different. They have a certain intensity. Their leaves are darker, their shapes more dramatic. Pay attention, she commands, her voice sharp. Looking is not the same as seeing. The life of a plant is in its leaf, its root, its flower. You must know which part to ask for help, and which part to leave untouched. She stops by a plant with delicate, fern-like leaves and small clusters of white flowers that look like lace. This one, she says, touching a flower head gently, is a friend. Wild carrot. Some call it Queen Anne's lace. You've seen it growing wild along the edges of the fields. A common weed. You've never given it a second thought. After a man has lain with you, Alara explains, you chew a spoonful of its seeds. 1 spoonful, right away. It makes the wound slippery. It tells the seed it is not welcome. She looks at you, ensuring you understand. The seeds, only the seeds. The root is good for soup, but it has no power for this. The flower is for beauty, but it has no voice. This is a startling piece of information. Modern science, centuries later, will conduct studies on this very plant, Docus carota, and find that its seeds do indeed contain compounds that can block progesterone synthesis, functioning as a surprisingly effective post-coital contraceptive. It's a stunning example of empirical knowledge, discovered through generations of trial and error, a piece of genuine science hidden within a matrix of folk belief. Alara doesn't know about progesterone, of course. The plant is a spirit or a property that is concentrated in its seeds. The language is different, but the result is the same. She moves on. And this, she says, pointing to a low-growing plant with silvery leaves. Mugwort. A woman's plant. It can bring on a late bleeding if it is due. She shows you how to identify it, how its leaves are green on top and silver underneath, how it smells sharp and clean when you crush a leaf between your fingers. She explains that a tea made from the leaves, drunk for 3 days, can cleanse the wound. But, as she speaks, her tone is laced with caution. With each plant she introduces, the implied danger grows. She is taking you deeper into her pharmacopoeia, from the relatively safe to the dangerously potent. The garden is not just a collection of remedies, it's a ladder of escalating risk. Historians will debate endlessly about the true efficacy of these herbal concoctions. With no standardized dosages, no quality control, and the variable potency of wild harvested plants, the results must have been wildly unpredictable. One woman's remedy could be another's poison. For every success story that was passed down as folklore, how many failures, how many stories of sickness or death were quietly buried and forgotten? The knowledge that survived was likely the knowledge that appeared to work, at least some of the time. Alara then points to a plant with dark, glossy leaves and small, bell-shaped flowers. A shiver goes down your spine. Even you, with your limited plant lore, have heard whispers about this one. Belladonna, this one, Alara says, her voice dropping to a near whisper, you do not touch. You do not even ask its name. Its whispers are madness, and its touch is the grave. It has its purpose, but not for you. She is teaching you the most important lesson of all, the knowledge of what to avoid. Her garden is a landscape of power, and power is indifferent. It can be used for healing or for harm, and the line between the two is terrifyingly thin. It all depends on knowledge, on dosage, and on intent. You look at the wild tangle of green around you, the world of potential cures and poisons, and you understand the source of the village's fear. This garden is a direct challenge to the established order. The priest offers prayers for healing. Alara offers a leaf. The priest promises salvation in the next life. Alara offers a bitter tea that might save you in this one. Hers is a tangible, earthy, and dangerous power. It's the power of the earth itself, and she is merely its interpreter. And as she leads you towards an even darker, more secluded corner of the garden, You know you are about to be introduced to the plants that don't just persuade, but command. Alara stops near a patch of delicate, feathery plants with tiny yellowish-green flowers. The plant looks unassuming, almost humble compared to the dramatic and sinister profile of the belladonna she warned you against. It has a sweet, herby smell that seems innocent enough. "This is Rue," she says, her voice taking on a new seriousness. And that, she gestures to a lacy, fern-like plant growing nearby, is tansy. These are not friends you asked for help lightly. These are arguments. You look from the plants to her face, trying to understand the distinction she's making. The wild carrot was a friend. These are arguments. She seems to be speaking a language of herbal personality, a taxonomy of botanical intent. The wild carrot seeds, the mugwort tea, she explains. They are for a womb that is merely forgetful. They remind it that the bleeding time is near. They clean the house, but they do not tear it down. She picks a small leaf of rue, holding it carefully between her thumb and forefinger. Rue is different. It does not persuade. It cowers. It is an angry cleaner. It will bring on the bleeding, even if the womb is not ready. It will bring it on with cramps and sickness. Her description is brutally vivid. You can almost feel the scouring she describes, a violent, unwelcome action inside your own body. This is the next level of intervention. You are no longer in the realm of gentle nudges and preventative measures. You are now discussing plants that can induce a miscarriage. These are abortifacients. And tansy, she continues, pointing with her chin, is much the same. A tea from its flowers can be a powerful purgative. It empties a woman out. But the dose, she pauses, looking you straight in the eye, her gaze intense. The dose is a whisper away from a poison. Too little, and it only makes you sick. Too much, and it will empty your life out along with the rest. This is the terrifying reality of the knowledge she holds. It is utterly without standardization. There are no neat white pills with the dosage precisely measured. The potency of a plant can change depending on the soil it grew in, the time of year it was picked, and even the weather on the day of harvest. A small handful of that. It's a form of high-stakes culinary guesswork. Historians have long been fascinated by these specific plants, rue tansy, and their even more dangerous cousins. They appear again and again in ancient and medieval texts, from Greek medical treatises to Anglo-Saxon herbals. Diacourcides, the ancient Greek physician, described rue's ability to expel the fetus. But this knowledge was always double-edged. The same texts that noted its efficacy also warned of its danger. The active chemical compounds in these plants are toxic. They work by irritating the uterus, causing contractions, but they also irritate the rest of the body. They can cause kidney damage, liver failure, and severe hemorrhaging. Alara is not just giving you a recipe, she is entrusting you with a dangerous secret and a heavy responsibility. You would make a tea, she instructs. Just a few leaves of rue, steeped in hot water, but not boiled. You drink it at night for 3 nights, no more. She doesn't say what happens if it's not enough, or what to do if you've taken too much. The silence hangs in the air, thick with unspoken possibilities, sickness, failure, death. This is what makes her role as a wise woman so precarious. If her remedy works, the woman she helped is silent, her secret safe. But if it fails, if the woman gets sick or dies, the blame will fall swiftly on Alara. It is a trade built on silent successes and very public failures. Every woman who comes to her is a gamble that could cost Alara her reputation, her freedom, and even her life. You look at the innocent-looking leaves of rue, and you see them for what they are, a desperate choice. A choice between the slow, grinding certainty of poverty and the sharp, immediate risk of poison. You are standing at a crossroads, and both paths lead through a valley of fear. Alara has shown you the way, but she cannot walk it for you. She is the keeper of the knowledge, not the bearer of the risk. That burden falls to you alone. And as she turns to lead you to one last plant, standing alone in a dark, damp corner of the garden, you have a feeling that the most dangerous lesson is yet to come. She leads you to the darkest corner of the garden, a place deliberately shielded from the sun by an overhanging elder tree. Here in the damp, black soil grows a single type of plant you've never seen before. It's a member of the mint family. You can tell by its square stem and the shape of its leaves, but it has a crawling, low-to-the-ground habit and a sharp, almost acrid scent that is far more pungent than the sweet spearmint that grows by the river. And this, Alara says, her voice devoid of all the previous nuance of friends or arguments. Her tone is flat grim. This is the last resort. This is not a conversation. This is a war. She crouches down, her old joint squeaking, and points a bony finger at the plant, penurial. The name itself seems to whisper of danger. It doesn't sound like a healer or a helper. It sounds like a punishment. Of all the plants in this garden, Alara says, looking up at you from her crouch, this one is the most eager to do its work. And the most treacherous. It will bring on the bleeding. It will bring it on with a fury you cannot imagine. It will scour the room until it is raw. It will empty you completely. Her words are a litany of violent verbs, painting a brutal picture of the plant's effect. She stands up slowly, brushing the dark soil from her fingers. You must never, ever use the fresh leaf. To chew it is to invite death to sit at your table. It must be dried. Carefully, away from the sun. She gestures to the rafters in her hut. A tea made from a tiny pinch of the dried leaves. A single cup. And then you wait. You do not take a second cup, no matter how desperate you are. You do not think that more will make it work faster. More will simply make it work on you work. It will stop your breath. It will turn your liver to stone. You feel a cold dread creep up your spine that has nothing to do with the chill in the shady corner of the garden. This is not medicine. This is poison, a controlled, targeted poison. Alara is outlining the rules for playing with fire, telling you how close you can get before you are consumed by the flames. Penurial. For centuries, this plant has been the most notorious and the most tragically effective of all the folk abortifacients. Its reputation was fearsome and well-deserved. The active ingredient, a volatile oil called pulgon, is a powerful toxin. In small, carefully controlled doses, it can stimulate uterine contractions. But the therapeutic window, the dose that is effective versus the dose that is lethal, is almost non-existent. A few drops too many of the essential oil, a few too many leaves in the tea, and it becomes a potent poison that causes massive liver and kidney failure, hemorrhaging, and death. The historical record is littered with the ghosts of women who made a fatal miscalculation with this plant. The chronicles are quieter about the ones for whom it worked. Success, after all, demanded silence. But the tragedies were often recorded, especially if they resulted in a criminal investigation or a panicked confession to a priest. This is the ultimate forbidden knowledge, not just because the church and the law condemned it, but because the knowledge itself was inherently lethal. Alara is not just a herbalist, she is a risk manager. She has spent a lifetime learning the personalities of these dangerous plants, learning their moods, their strengths, their terrible potential. And her reluctance is palpable. She did not offer this option first. She led you through the layers of her craft, from the symbolic magic of amulets to the gentle persuasion of wild carrot seeds, to the harsh arguments of ruined tansy. Penurial is the final, desperate word in that conversation. There is a long-standing academic debate about whether women like Alara truly understood the toxicology of these plants, or if they were simply passing on inherited traditions without fully grasping the underlying dangers. Were they proto-scientists conducting careful experiments, or were they practitioners of a ritualized and often deadly form of magic? Listening to Alara, you feel the answer is both. She understands the cause and effect this plant produces this result, but she frames it in the language of spirits and intent. The plant is eager, treacherous. This anthropomorphism is her way of understanding and respecting its power. It's a way of saying, this force is not entirely under my control. You do not want this one, Alara says, her voice softening for the first time. It's a plea. This is for the woman who has no other choice. The woman who would rather face the grave than the birthing bed. She looks at you, her eyes filled with a deep, ancient sadness, the sorrow of a woman who has had to offer this terrible choice too many times. First, you try the argument. You only declare war when you are prepared to die in the battle. With that, she turns and shuffles back toward her hut, leaving you alone in the dark corner with the penurial, its sharp scent a stark reminder of the deadly seriousness of the path you are on. You follow Alara back into the hut, your mind reeling. The air inside, once just smoky and mysterious, now feels heavy with the weight of her words, with the ghosts of risks taken. She doesn't offer you a sample of the penurial, and you are too terrified to ask. The lesson was in the warning, not the offering. She returns to the first jar she had taken down, the one with the chopped dark leaves and tiny seeds. She scoops a small amount to measure that seems impossibly imprecise to your anxious eyes into a square of linen cloth. Is it a spoonful? A pinch? 2 pinches? Your life could depend on that distinction, and yet there is no scale, no measuring cup, only her gnarled fingers and a lifetime of experience. This is Rue, she says, her voice returning to a more practical, instructive tone. And these, she adds, taking a few lacy flower heads from a different jar and adding them to the pile, are tansy flowers, dried last autumn, at the full moon. They are sleepy now, not as angry as in the summer. She is telling you the potency is lower, safer, but is it still strong enough? She folds the linen into a small packet and ties it securely with a bit of string. She hands it to you. It feels warm from her hand, a small, light bundle that contains an immense and terrifying power. 3 nights, she repeats, her voice a low command. A tea from a pinch of the rue leaves. Just a pinch. After the 3rd night, if the bleeding has not come, you drink a tea from 2 of the tansy flowers. Then you wait. You give your body time to listen. This is the heart of the problem, the core of the danger, the complete lack of standardization. In a future world of pharmaceutical precision, a doctor will prescribe 200 milligrams of a specific compound, and the patient will receive exactly that. Your prescription is a pinch of a plant whose chemical makeup is a mystery, its potency a variable, its dosage an intuitive art form. The very concept of a milligram is alien. Your world measures in pinches, handfuls, and as much as you can hold between thumb and forefinger. It's a system based on feel and tradition, not on objective, repeatable science. This is a source of endless frustration for medical historians trying to understand medieval remedies. When an old text prescribes a dram of a certain herb, what did that truly mean? A dram was a unit of weight, yes. But without calibrated scales, it was often just as much an approximation as Elara's pinch. This is why the phrase "the dose makes the poison" is so profoundly true in your world. The same plant that could offer salvation could, with just a few extra leaves, bring disaster. You think of the village baker. He knows from experience how much yeast to add to his dough. Too little, and the bread is fat and hard. Too much, and it overproofs and collapses. He learned this through years of trial and error, through countless failed loaves, but his failures result in bad bread. Or Alara's miscalculation could result in a hemorrhage from which you never recover. Alara seems to sense your terror. The plants are not a certainty, she says softly. They are an offering. You are asking your body to accept a gift. Sometimes it will refuse. She is managing your expectations, preparing you for the possibility of failure. And you must be careful. If the sickness from the tea is too strong, if the cramping is more than you can bear, you must stop. You must drink only water and weak broth. You must not force what is not meant to be. She is teaching you to listen to your own body, to become your own physician. In an age with no emergency rooms, no quick access to a doctor, self-awareness is a critical survival skill. You are the only one who can judge if the remedy is working or if it is killing you. You clutch the small linen packet in your hand. Your palm is sweating. This small bundle represents a complete break from the world you know. The priest offers you redemption through prayer and penance. Alara has given you a handful of dried leaves. The priest speaks of God's will, the grand, inscrutable plan. Alara speaks of the will of plants, of their moods and their anger. There is a deep philosophical chasm between these two worldviews. One is based on faith in the divine and unseen. The other is based on faith in the earth, in the tangible, and in the knowledge passed down by generations of women who listen to the whispers of the green world. By accepting this packet, you are choosing a side. You are stepping away from the grand cathedral of divine will into the wild, untamed garden of folk knowledge. Historians will argue about whether these two beliefs were really separate. For many people like you, they probably coexisted. You might pray to the Virgin Mary for a safe delivery in one breath, and in the next, chew wild carrot seeds to prevent a conception. The medieval mind was perfectly capable of holding what a modern mind might see as contradictory beliefs. You needed all the help you could get, whether it came from heaven or from the earth. You look at Alara, at her wrinkled face and her nerve-wrinkled clear eyes. She is not a demon, not a witch out of a horror story. She is a pragmatist, a scientist of a forgotten, intuitive science. She is a woman who has found a way to wield a small amount of power in a world that gives her none. She has given you a tool, a dangerous, unreliable, terrifying tool, but a tool nonetheless. And as you prepare to leave her hut, the weight of it in your hand feels heavier than a bag of stones. You tuck the linen packet deep into a fold of your dress, the scratchy fabric a constant, secret reminder against your skin. As you step out of Alara's clearing and back onto the path toward the village, it feels as if you are re-entering a different dimension. The familiar sounds and sights of your world now seem subtly altered, charged with a new and dangerous meaning. The biggest change is the church. From the path, you can see its stone tower rising above the thatch roofs of the village huts. Before, it was a symbol of comfort, of order, of community. It was the center of your world, a fixed point in the turning of the seasons. Its bell marked your days, its holy water cleansed your sins, its graveyard would be your final resting place. Now, as you look at it, a cold dread washes over you. The church is no longer a sanctuary. It is a watchtower. Inside your mind, you can hear the priest's voice, not his gentle, consoling tones, but the one he uses for sermons on damnation. You can hear him thundering from a pulpit about the sanctity of life, a gift from God that only God has the right to take away. You can hear him quoting St. Augustine, who declared that any attempt to interfere with the natural act of procreation was a sin akin to homicide. The packet of herbs in your dress feels like it's glowing with a malevolent heat, a brand marking you as a sinner of the worst kind. The church's position on this was, for the most part, uncomprehensibly harsh. For centuries, theologians and canon lawyers had debated the precise moment of end soul meant, the point at which a fetus receives a soul. Was it after 40 days for a boy and 80 or 90 days for a girl, as some earlier thinkers like Aristotle had proposed? This was not just an abstract philosophical debate, it had profound legal and moral implications. If a soul was present, then ending a pregnancy was, without question, murder in the eyes of God. By your time in the High Middle Ages, the dominant theological view, heavily influenced by thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, was leaning toward the idea of delayed ensoulment. However, this academic nuance rarely trickled down to the parish level. For your village priest, the message was simple and absolute: all life is sacred from the very beginning. Preventing a conception through magical or unnatural means was a grave sin of lust, a rejection of the procreative purpose of marriage. Inducing a miscarriage, or procurator abortus, was a crime that carried the penalty of excommunication. You would be cast out, cut off from the sacraments, denied communion, and should you die in such a state, refused a Christian burial in the hallowed ground of the churchyard. You would be buried outside the walls, in unconsecrated earth, your soul forever damned to wander in limbo or burn in hell. This was not a metaphor to you and everyone you knew, it was a terrifyingly literal fate. And it wasn't just about the afterlife. The church's gaze had a very real and present power. The system of confession gave the priest a window into the most secret corners of his parishioners' lives. You are supposed to confess your sins to him regularly. How could you ever face him again, knowing the secret you carry? To confess would be to invite punishment and public shame. To not confess would be to compound your sin, to receive the holy sacrament of communion with a lie on your soul, an act of profound blasphemy. You see your neighbors, a small group of women returning from the fields, and you instinctively shrink back, hoping they don't see you coming from the direction of Alora's hut. The church's power wasn't just wielded by the priest, it was enforced by the community itself. Your neighbors were your judges. They were the eyes and ears of the parish. A suspicious whisper, a malicious piece of gossip, a pie saw her leaving the Cunning woman's cottage. She was looking pale and secretive could be enough to bring the full weight of clerical authority down upon you. Historians are still debating the extent to which these official doctrines were actually enforced at the village level. Parish records are often incomplete, and they certainly don't capture every secret whispered or every herbal tea brewed. It's likely that there was often a disconnect between the rigid laws written in Rome and the messy, pragmatic reality of village life. A local priest might be more lenient, more understanding of the hardships his flock faced, eager to root out sin and superstition wherever he found it. You have no way of knowing which kind of man your priest is until you are brought before him. As you finally reach the first huts of the village, the comforting smell of wood smoke and cooking fires does nothing to calm your racing heart. The packet of herbs seems to get heavier with every step. It's not just a potential cure for your physical condition anymore. It's a mark of heresy. It's a spiritual poison that could sever your connection to your community, your faith, and your God. You have solved one problem, finding a possible remedy only to create a new and perhaps even more terrifying one. How to live with the crime you are about to commit. The shadow of the church tower stretches along in the late afternoon sun, and you feel as if it's reaching for you, ready to pull you back into the light or drag you down into the dark. Back in the relative privacy of your own hut, you hide the linen packet. You find a loose stone in the hearth, a place you pray no one else would ever think to look. As you slide the stone back into place, you feel a profound sense of isolation. The world of dangerous herbs and threatening church towers is a lonely one. But as you sit by the cooling embers, your mind, desperate for any alternative, turns to another category of knowledge, one that feels less magical and less sinful. Is there a way to prevent the seed from ever reaching the womb in the first place? This question was as old as humanity itself, and the answers, whispered between women or passed down from worldly wise elders, were often a mixture of ingenuity and wishful thinking. You think of stories you've half heard, snippets of gossip exchanged between married women when they thought the younger girls weren't listening. The talk of sponges. A small, soft sea sponge, a luxury item brought inland by traveling merchants, could be soaked in a liquid and inserted into the body before relations. The sponge itself would act as a barrier, and the liquid would, hopefully, do the rest. The most common liquid mentioned was vinegar. Its sharp, acidic properties were thought to be hostile to a man's seed. It was a simple, accessible substance, present in almost every household. Another option, though far more expensive and rare, was lemon juice. The logic was the same: its powerful acidity would create an inhospitable environment. This method sounds blessedly straightforward compared to the botanical minefield Delara laid out for you. No pinches to measure, no angry plant spirits to appease. It feels more mechanical, more scientific. And in a way it was. These women were unknowingly practicing a rudimentary form of chemistry. The acidity of vinegar and lemon juice does indeed have a spermicide effect. The sponge acts as a diaphragm. It was a surprisingly sound concept, a piece of proto-science born of observation and domestic resources. But the reality was far from foolproof. How much vinegar was enough? How long did its effect last? The sea sponges themselves were not exactly sterile medical devices. They were natural organisms, and without proper cleaning, which was difficult with the harsh soaps and limited hot water available, they could become breeding grounds for infection. A simple attempt at contraception could easily lead to a painful and dangerous illness. And then there were even stranger barrier methods, born of desperation and whatever materials were at hand. Some ancient texts, which you would have no knowledge of but whose wisdom may have trickled down through centuries of folklore, speak of using a hollowed-out pomegranate half. Others mention wads of fine wool, soaked in honey or tree sap, meant to create a sticky trap. One of the most peculiar and debated methods involved animal intestines. For centuries, people had used the cleaned and prepared intestines of sheep or other animals as sausage casings. It was a small leap of logic to see if this thin, durable membrane could be used for another purpose. This is the ancient ancestor of the modern condom. However, this knowledge was exceedingly rare, more likely to be found in the brothels of a large city than in a rural village like yours. The idea of it would be completely alien to you. The very thought of handling such a thing would seem bizarre and unclean. The bigger problem, you realize, is that all these methods require foresight, preparation, and a level of control over the intimate act that you simply do not possess. In your world, a wife's duty to her husband is absolute. To refuse him, or to insist on pausing to insert a vinegar-soaked sponge, could be seen as an act of defiance, an insult to his authority. It would require a conversation, a negotiation, that the power dynamics of your marriage might not allow. By necessity, a secret one, and these physical methods were anything but secret. They required action prompts, a deliberate and noticeable intervention. Historians often refer to these as female-controlled methods of contraception, and in a sense they were. But that term belies the immense social and interpersonal hurdles a woman would have to overcome to use them effectively and consistently. It wasn't just about finding a sponge, it was about navigating the complex, unwritten rules of marriage duty and desire in a patriarchal world. Then what about the man's role in all this? The most obvious method of all. The simple act of withdrawal before climax, known as coitus interruptus, was certainly practiced. It mentioned disapprovingly in the Bible in the story of Onan. And church confessors' manuals from your era are filled with questions designed to root out this particular sin. Have you spilled your seed outside the proper vessel? The priest might ask, his voice low and accusatory, a perversion of the marital act away from its procreative purpose. While it was undoubtedly the most common form of contraception throughout history, relying on it placed all the responsibility and all the blame for the sin squarely on the man, and it required a level of self-control and cooperation that you might not be able to count on. You sigh, the brief flicker of hope dimming. The physical methods, while less spiritually terrifying, are practically impossible. They are too conspicuous, too difficult to obtain, and they require a conversation you are too afraid to have. You are trapped. The path of herbs is secret but dangerous. The path of barriers is safer but impossible to conceal. Your choices are shrinking, and the loose stone in the hearth feels like the only option left. As you sit there, trapped between the dangerous and the impractical, your mind drifts. You wonder where this knowledge even comes from. Alara learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers, a chain of whispers stretching back into the mists of time. You imagine this chain, this secret river of knowledge, flowing through the centuries. It must have started somewhere. You are, without knowing it, pondering the deep history of contraception, a story that stretches back far beyond your small medieval village, back to the very cradles of civilization. The desperate desire to control fertility is not a new problem, it is an ancient human struggle. The methods you've considered, the herbs, the barriers, the magical amulets, are not medieval inventions. They are echoes, fragmented and distorted, of practices that are thousands of years old. If you could peer into the distant past, you would see a woman in ancient Egypt, around 1500 B.C., preparing a contraceptive paste. She is following a recipe written on a papyrus scroll, what future archaeologists will call the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents in the world. She is mixing shredded acacia leaves, honey, and a bit of lint to form a small tampon-like pessary. She believes the stickiness of the honey will trap the seed. She has no idea that the acacia leaves, as they ferment, produce lactic acid, a genuinely effective spermicide still used in contraceptive gels thousands of years later. Her method, born of observation and tradition, is surprisingly scientific. You would see a woman in ancient Greece, a follower of the physicians Orinus of Ephesus, who wrote an entire treatise on gynecology. He advised against the dangerous, poison-based abortifacients. Instead, he recommended that a woman, after urinations, should squat, sneeze, and wipe herself clean to try and dislodge the seed. He also suggested blocking the entrance to the womb with a wad of wool soaked in olive oil or honey, grounded in a physical understanding of the body. You would travel to ancient Rome and hear the poet Lucretius write about the importance of movement, suggesting certain physical positions were less likely to result in conception. You would find the naturalist Pliny the Elder writing with great confidence about the effectiveness of magical amulets, much like the ones Alara described. He recommended tying the eggs of a spider, wrapped in a piece of deerskin, to a woman's arm, The line between what we would call science and magic was just as blurry then as it is for you now. This is a point of constant debate among historians of medicine, how much of this ancient knowledge survived the collapse of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity. Much was lost. The great libraries were burned. The trade routes that carried exotic herbs and sea sponges were disrupted. And the church actively suppressed what it considered pagan and heretical practices. The knowledge was driven underground. It ceased to be written down by learned physicians and instead became the secret oral tradition of the folk healer, the midwife, the wise woman like Elara. What survived was oft unfragmented and degraded. A complex herbal recipe from a Greek physician might be reduced to a single ingredient, the careful instructions for its preparation lost or distorted. The name of a plant might be confused with another, similar-looking one, with disastrous results. The scientific reasoning behind the Egyptian acacia paste was forgotten, leaving only the magic of the ritual. The knowledge became, in a sense, fossilized. It was passed down not with understanding, but with the rigid instruction this is what our mothers did. LRS use of wild carrot seeds is a perfect example of this. The knowledge that it works has survived for millennia. The ancient Greek physician Hippocrates mentioned it. But the why has been lost. Elara attributes it to the plant spirit making the womb slippery. The Egyptian woman attributed her success to the stickiness of honey. The underlying scientific principle is invisible to you both, but the practice endures. So when you hold the packet of ruined tansy, you are not just holding a handful of dried leaves. You are holding the end of a long, broken telephone line that stretches back through time. You are holding the accumulated, filtered, and often misunderstood wisdom of countless generations of women who stood exactly where you stand now, desperate, afraid, and searching for a choice. This realization doesn't make your situation any less terrifying, but it makes it feel less lonely. Your struggle is not just yours. It is a timeless human story. The priest in his stone church represents a powerful, organized, but literate tradition that seeks to control your body from above. Elara, in her smoky hut, represents a tradition that is much older, more chaotic, and more deeply rooted in the earth and in the shared experience of women. You are a battlefield for these ancient forces, and the choice you make will be your own small, unwritten chapter in this long and secret history. You find your husband by the fire when you return, mending a strap for one of his tools. He looks up and gives you a tired but gentle smile. He is a good man. He works hard. He does not drink to excess, and he has never raised a hand to you or the children. A wave of guilt washes over you so powerful it almost makes you dizzy. You are plotting a secret rebellion against his lineage, against the continuation of his name. You watch him work, his hands strong and capable, and you wonder, for the first time, about his role in all of this. What is a man's responsibility? In your world, the answer is brutally simple. A man's responsibility is to provide, to work the land, to pay the taxes, to protect the household. A woman's responsibility is to manage the household, to care for the children, and to produce them. The division of labor is clear, ordained by God and reinforced by centuries of tradition. The burden of fertility and the consequences of it falls almost entirely on you. It is your body that will swell and change. It is you who will face the life-threatening ordeal of childbirth. It is you who will lactate, and whose work will be hampered by the needs of a newborn. And therefore it is you who carries the secret, terrible burden of preventing it. Did men in your time even think about this? It's a question that is incredibly difficult for historians to answer. The vast majority of historical records, chronicles, legal texts, theological treatises were written by men, and specifically by celibate churchmen. Their perspective on sex was almost entirely focused on sin, lust, and procreation within the bounds of marriage. The practical domestic realities of family size and resource management were rarely discussed. The voices of ordinary husbands and fathers from your era are almost completely silent. We don't have their diaries. We don't have their letters. Their thoughts on the matter are lost to time. Did your husband ever lie awake at night, like you are now, counting the mouths to feed and feeling an utter fear in his stomach? It's possible. He is not a fool. He understands the brutal economics of your life as well as you do. Perhaps he practices the only form of contraception over which he has direct control, the sin of onan. Coitus interruptus, it was, without a doubt, the most common method of family planning for centuries, precisely because it required no props, no herbs, and no discussion. It was a man's secret decision, made in the moment. But it was still a sin. A man who confessed this to a priest would be given a penance, perhaps days or weeks of fasting and prayer. For a man whose life is defined by hard physical labor, fasting is a serious punishment. It's possible he chooses to risk God's wrath to prevent a hunger that is more immediate and certain. But you would never know. It would be his secret, just as the packet of herbs is yours. The whole topic is shrouded in a cloak of privacy and shame. It's not something a husband and wife would openly discuss. The purpose of marital relations, according to the Church, was procreation. Any act that deliberately thwarted that purpose was sinful. To even have a conversation about it would be to conspire to commit a sin together. So you are left to guess at each other's thoughts, to manage your shared problem from opposite sides of a wall of silence. There's a subtle but persistent debate among social historians about the power dynamics of the medieval bedroom. Was the woman a completely passive vessel, subject to her husband's desires with no say in the matter? Or were there subtle negotiations, unspoken understandings, and private agreements that the historical record simply cannot capture? Folk tales and court records occasionally hint at women using a lack of enthusiasm or feigned illness as a way to manage the frequency of relations, a desperate, indirect form of fertility control. But in the end, the physical and biological reality is inescapable. He can walk away from the act unchanged. You are the one who might carry its consequences for 9 months and a lifetime after. The risk is asymmetrical. The burden is yours. This fundamental inequality is the engine of the entire secret world you have just entered. It's why the knowledge held by women like Elara was so vital and so dangerous. It was a response to this imbalance of power. It was a set of tools, however crude and risky, that gave women a small measure of control over the one domain that was uniquely theirs, their own bodies. You look at your husband again, and the guilt is now mixed with a strange kind of pity. He is trapped too. He is trapped by his duty to be a man, to be a provider, to be the head of a family. No matter how large it grows, he is as much a prisoner of the system as you are. You are two people bound together by affection and by law, struggling under the same crushing weight, but forced by the rules of your world to bear it in isolation, in silence. Days turn into a week. You haven't used the herbs yet. You are waiting, praying for a sign that you are wrong, that your body will right itself, that this entire nightmare was just a figment of your fear. But with each passing morning, the sickness returns and the terrible certainty grows. Your secret festers. In this agonizing limbo, your mind latches onto any pattern, any omen, searching for an explanation or a prediction. You find yourself watching the moon. Is it waxing or waning? Did this all begin when the moon was full? You've heard the old wives' tales that link a woman's cycle to the lunar cycle. The moon pulls the tides of the ocean, surely it must pull at the fluids and humors within a woman's body. This belief is ancient, deep-seated, a piece of folklore that will persist for centuries. You also think about the stars. Was there a strange alignment of the planets when you were conceived? The village has no astrologer, but the belief that the heavens influence earthly events is everywhere. The Church officially condemns astrology as a pagan superstition, a way of denying God's omnipotence and man's free will. But the belief is too powerful to be stomped out. Even kings and popes secretly consult astrologers. For you, it's not about complex charts, it's a vague, unsettling feeling that your fate might be written in the stars, that this pregnancy was destined, inescapable. These beliefs are all tangled up with the dominant medical theory of your time, the doctrine of the four humors. This idea, inherited from the ancient Greeks, particularly Hippocrates and Galen, is the foundation of all official medicine. It holds that the human body is composed of four essential fluids, or humus: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humor corresponds to an element: air, water, fire, earth, and equality: hot, cold, wet, dry. A healthy person has these four humors in perfect balance. Illness is caused by an imbalance: too much of one, not enough of another. A fever, for example, is an excess of yellow bile, hot and dry. The cure is to introduce something cold and wet, like a cooling cucumber poultice or a particular herb believed to have cooling properties. This framework is also used to explain everything about reproduction. Both men and women are believed to produce seed, a concoction of their humors. Conception occurs when these two seeds, hot and moist from the man and cold and moist from the woman, combine in the womb. The womb is seen as a kind of oven that cooks the combined seed into a fetus. If the man's seed is stronger and hotter, the child will be a boy. If the woman's is dominant, it will be a girl. It's a beautifully symmetrical and logical system. And it is, of course, completely wrong. But it's the only system you have. Within this framework, your current predicament could be explained as your body being in a state of excessive moistness, allowing the seed to take root too easily. The herbs Elara gave you, like rue, were considered hot and dry plants. Their function, in this medical logic, was to introduce heat and dryness into your cold, moist womb, making it a hostile environment for the fetus and causing it to be expelled. This humoral theory is one of the most persistent and influential ideas in the history of science. It dominated Western medical thought for over 1300 years. Historians still marvel at its longevity. Was it because it was so comprehensive, offering an explanation for everything? Or was it because it was endorsed by the Church, as it fit neatly into a view of a divinely ordered, symmetrical universe? The debate continues. For you, it's not a theory, it's the truth about how your body works. So you lie awake at night, trying to piece it all together. The moon, the stars, the balance of your internal fluids. You feel like a boat adrift on a sea of powerful, mysterious forces. You are at the mercy of the cosmos, of your own internal tides. The feeling is one of profound powerlessness. This is the psychological landscape of your world. There is little concept of randomness or coincidence. Everything has a cause, a meaning, a purpose. A failed crop is a punishment from God. A deformed animal is an omen of evil. And an unwanted pregnancy, what is that? Is it a punishment for some forgotten sin? A test of your faith? Or is it just a disastrous misalignment of the humors, a biological accident? You don't know. And this not knowing is a kind of torture. It makes Elara's packet of herbs feel even more like a transgression. To use it is not just to risk your health, it's to take your fate, which should be in the hands of God and the stars and the humors, and seize it for yourself. It's an assertion of individual will against the perceived order of the universe. A small, lonely, terrifying act of rebellion. Outside your shuttered window, and you feel its pull, not on your womb, but on your courage, which feels like it's at its lowest tide. The waiting ends. It ends on a morning like any other, except that when you wake, the familiar wave of nausea is accompanied by something else, a faint, fluttery sensation deep in your belly. It's a feeling you remember from your other pregnancies. It is not a symptom or a theory anymore. It is the undeniable, terrifying quickening. The first flicker of movement from the life inside you. In an instant, everything changes. The vague hope you were clinging to evaporates. The secret you've been carrying is no longer just a suspicion, it's a living, moving reality. The time for gentle persuasion and slippery worms is over. The friend plants like wild carrot are useless now. The house is no longer empty, an occupant has moved in and is beginning to stir. A tidal wave of panic, cold and sharp, crashes over you. You stumble out of the hut, away from the sleeping forms of your family, and lean against the rough bark of an oak tree, gasping for air. The quickening. This is a moment of profound significance, both emotionally and legally. For you, emotionally, it is devastating. It transforms the abstract problem into a concrete being. It is no longer a condition or a late bleeding. It is in some undeniable way a child. The act you are contemplating, which already felt immense, now feels monstrous. Legally and theologically, this moment is also a critical dividing line. While the Church condemned all forms of contraception and abortion, it reserved its harshest penalties for abortion after the quickening. In the eyes of both canon law and the secular laws of many kingdoms, this was the point where the act shifted from a serious sin to something much closer to homicide. The fetus was now demonstrating its vitality, its separate existence. Many theologians believe this was the moment of ensoulment, when God infused the developing body with a soul. To act now would be to knowingly extinguish a life that was, in the eyes of God and man, truly alive. You feel utterly, hopelessly trapped. The path behind you is closed. The path forward leads to a future you cannot bear. The packet of herbs you have hidden in the hearth now seems both more necessary and more evil than ever before. To use it now is to cross a terrible line. You sink to the ground, the damp earth cold beneath you. Despair is a physical thing, a heavy cloak that smothers you. You feel a kinship with the trapped animals you've seen in snares, the wild, frantic terror in their eyes. This is what true desperation feels like. It's a state where the fear of the future becomes so enormous that it eclipses all other fears: the fear of pain, the fear of sin, the fear of death itself. This is the psychological state that drove medieval women to the most extreme and dangerous measures. When the amulets and the gentle herbal teas failed, when the quickening had occurred, the choices became brutal. This is where the historical accounts turned dark and grim. You've heard whispered stories, tales told in hushed, horrified tones, of what women in your situation might do. Stories of drinking concoctions far more potent and poisonous than anything Alara would ever dare prescribe. Potions laced with toxic metals like lead or arsenic, obtained from a tanner or a blacksmith, that would kill the fetus but just as often kill the mother. You've heard of physical means, violent and crude, of women throwing themselves down flights of stairs, of strapping boards tightly across their abdomen to crush the womb, of using probes, a spindle, a sharpened stick to try and physically disrupt the pregnancy, a shockingly dangerous act that almost always led to catastrophic internal injury, infection, and a painful, agonizing death. Historians are divided on how common these truly desperate acts were. By their very nature, they were secret and often fatal, leaving little trace in the historical record unless they resulted in a deathbed confession or a criminal investigation. But that they happened is undeniable. They are the grim testament to the sheer force of human desperation, a force strong enough to make a woman inflict such violence upon her own body. You sit there, shivering in the dawn chill, and you understand it. You understand how a person could be driven to that point. When all other doors are locked, you begin to look for a way to break down the wall, no matter the cost. The flutter in your belly comes again, a tiny, innocent signal that seals your doom. The time for subtlety is over. The arguments of ruined Tansy, which seemed so frightening before, now feel like your only remaining hope. They are a terrible risk, but they are less terrible than the image of a sharpened stick, less terrible than the thought of ration with one more mouth to feed. The quickening has forced your hand. The secret war you've been waging has just escalated. You rise to your feet, your face set in a grim, tear-streaked mask. You will go back to the hut. You will take the packet from its hiding place, and tonight, when the family is asleep, you will brew the tea. You will brew the tea. You will declare your war. That night, the hut is filled with a tension only you can feel. The soft breathing of your sleeping family sounds like a countdown. Your husband's arm is thrown across your waist in his sleep, a gesture of casual intimacy that now feels like a cage. You wait until his breathing deepens into the slow, steady rhythm of profound slumber. You wait until the midnight bell has tolled, its last echo dissolving into the oppressive silence. Then you slip out of bed. The embers in the hearth provide just enough of a faint, hellish glow to see by. Your hands are trembling so badly you can barely work the loose stone free. You retrieve the small linen packet. It feels impossibly light. You unwrap it carefully, the dry herbal scent of ruined tansy rising to meet you, a smell you will associate with fear for the rest of your life. You pour a little water from the bucket into your smallest cooking pot and set it near the embers, pushing it close enough to get hot but not to boil. Your heart is a frantic hammer against your ribs. Every tiny sound, the scrape of the pot on the stone, the rustle of the herbs sounds like a thunderclap in the stillness. You remember Alara's instructions: a pinch of the rue. You look at the pile of chopped dark leaves. What is a pinch? Your fingers are numb, clumsy with terror. You take what you hope is a small amount and drop it into the warming water. The leaves unfurl slowly, releasing their essence, turning the water a pale, greenish brown. You have made your choice. You have brewed your poison. This is the moment of ultimate desperation. You have moved past persuasion into the realm of aggressive into the realm of aggressive intervention. The methods you are using, the raw and tansy tea, are at the gentler end of the spectrum of what a desperate woman might do. But in your mind the chasm has been crossed. You think of the other, more horrifying methods whispered about in the darkest corners of village gossip. The ones that leave no room for ambiguity, the violent, physical attempts to end a pregnancy. You've heard of women binding their abdomens with tight cords, hoping to restrict the growth of the womb. A terrible, prolonged method that likely did more harm to a woman's internal organs than to the pregnancy itself. You recall a story about a girl in a neighboring village, shamed and unmarried, who was said to have consumed a massive quantity of the strongest ale, then spent hours jumping from the top of a barrel, landing hard on her heels. The belief was that the repeated, violent jarring could dislodge the fetus. The result, more often than not, was internal bleeding or a broken bone, with the pregnancy remaining stubbornly intact. These methods highlight a profound ignorance of anatomy, a desperate flailing in the dark, but they also highlight the sheer force of will involved. The willingness to endure pain, to inflict violence upon oneself, in the service of a greater, more terrifying fear. And then there were the poisons. Not the capricious plant poisons that Alara managed with such care, but crude, industrial toxins. A woman might obtain a small amount of lead from a potter, or mercury from an alchemist or a charlatan doctor, and mix it into her food or drink. These heavy metals are potent teratogen, capable of causing developmental defects or fetal death. But they are also systemic poisons, ravaging the mother's body, causing neurological damage, kidney failure, and a slow, agonizing death. It was a form of physiological Russian roulette, a gamble that the poison would kill the fetus before it killed you. The most extreme and dangerous method of all was the one that involved a direct, physical intrusion into the womb. A woman, or perhaps an unskilled back alley practitioner in a city, might use a tool to sharpen a piece of wood, a metal knitting needle, even a goose squad to try and pierce the amniotic sac. The lack of anatomical knowledge made this horrificacy imprecise. The risk of perforating the uterus, the bowel, or the bladder was immense. Sepsis, a massive, systemic infection, was the almost certain outcome. It was a death sentence, chosen by women who saw the alternative as a fate even worse than death. Historians who study this grim subject often debate the language used. Or is it, as some scholars suggest, more accurately described in the context of the time as restoring the menses? The latter framing places the act within the humoral theory of medicine. It's about unblocking a natural process, not ending a life. For the woman herself, this linguistics often might have been a crucial psychological shield, a way to frame her actions as medicinal rather than homicidal. But as you sit there, the warm cup in your hands, these distinctions feel meaningless. You know we're trying to end the life that has begun inside you. You lift the cup to your lips. The tea is bitter, the taste acrid and green. You close your eyes and drink it all in one long, desperate swallow. You have now truly declared war, and all you can do is wait to see who the casualty will be. You crawl back into your sleeping palate, the bitter taste of rue still coating your tongue. You lie perfectly still, listening to the frantic beating of your own heart, waiting. Every twitch, every gurgle of your stomach sends a jolt of mingled hope and terror through you. As you lie there in the dark, another fear begins to surface, one that is separate from the church's damnation and the herb's poison. It's the fear of the law. While the priest threatens you with the fires of the next world, your feudal lord can make your life a living hell in this one. In the eyes of the manor court, your crime is not one of sin, but of property. You and your family are serfs bound to this land. You are, in a very real sense, the Lord's property. Your husband's labor belongs to the Lord for 3 days a week. Your children, upon reaching working age, will also owe him their labor. A new child is a future asset to the manor, a future laborer for his field, a future soldier for his levy, a future servant for his household. By ending a pregnancy, You are not just making a personal choice, you are depriving your lord of a future resource. In the cold, hard calculus of feudalism, stealing from him, the secular laws regarding abortion and infanticide were often just as harsh, if not harsher, than the church's canons. While theologians debated the moment events all meant, lords and kings were concerned with more practical matters: population, labor, and control. If you were caught, you would be dragged before the manor court. This was not a grand hall of justice. It was likely held in the Lord's great hall, or even in the open air, presided over by the Lord himself or his appointed steward. The reeve. Your judges would be your neighbors, the other tenants of the manor, serving as the jury. There would be no lawyer to defend you. You would be expected to speak for yourself, to face your accusers directly. The punishment for procuring an abortion could be severe. A heavy fine that your family could never hope to pay, plunging you into a debt from which you would never escape. A public shaming in the stocks, where you would be pelted with mud and insults by the very people you once called your friends. A flogging, a brutal and humiliating public display of the Lord's power. And if the act was deemed infanticide, the killing of a child after its birth, the penalty was almost universally death. And not a quick death. The methods were brutal, designed to be a public spectacle, a deterrent to others. Drowning, burying alive, or burning at the stake were all common punishments for women convicted of killing their newborns. You shiver in the dark, a cold sweat on your skin that has nothing to do with the tea you drank. The line between a late-term abortion and infanticide was dangerously blurry. If the herbs worked, and you expelled a fetus that was developed enough to take a single breath, could they call it murder? Who would be there to witness it? Who would be there to witness it? There is a famous legal text from England, written a century or so before your time by a jurist named Bracton. He wrote that if someone strikes a pregnant woman or gives her poison whereby he has caused an abortion, if the fetus be already formed and animated, he commits homicide. The language is chillingly clear. Formed and animated. The quickening you felt, the flutter of life. That single fact could be enough to turn your desperate act of self-preservation into a capital crime. Historians who pore over these old court records find that prosecutions for abortion were relatively rare. It was an incredibly difficult crime to prove. It was a secret act, usually done by a woman alone. The only evidence was often the testimony of a rival or a confession extracted under duress. Prosecutions for infanticide, however, were more common. A baby's body found in a river or buried in a field was undeniable proof. Young girls with no family support were the most frequent victims of these accusations. A married woman like you was in a slightly safer position, but the risk was still very real. And what about Elara? If you were caught, you would be relentlessly pressured to name your accomplice. They would want to know who provided you with the poison. Elara's life would be forfeit as well. She would be accused not just of helping you, but of witchcraft, of using her dark knowledge to defy God and the law. The fear is a physical thing, a tightening in your chest. You have put not only your own life and soul at risk, but the lives of your family and the woman who tried to help you. If your husband were to discover your secret, he could be implicated as a conspirator. Your children could be orphaned. The web of consequences spreads out from the cup of bitter tea you drank, ensnaring everyone you love. A sharp cramp suddenly seizes your abdomen, doubling you over. It's beginning. The war has started. And as the waves of pain begin to roll through you, you pray to a God you have justified. You pray that this works. And you pray, with equal fervor, that no one ever finds out. The cramps intensify, rolling through you in savage, relentless waves. You bite down on your own hand to keep from crying out, the coppery taste of blood mixing with the lingering bitterness of the rue. You are alone in this, a solitary mariner on a stormy sea of pain, praying for a landfall that might also be your destruction. As the agony deepens, a new and even more terrifying fear begins to worm its way into your consciousness, the fear of the witch-finder. What if the herbs fail to do their work, but instead plunge you into a violent, delirious fever? In your delirium, what secrets might you spill? And if you sicken and die, who will be blamed? In the paranoid, superstitious landscape of your world, the answer is simple and terrifying: the witch. The figure of the wise woman, the cunning folk like Elara, has always occupied a precarious space. She is both a necessary resource and an object of deep suspicion. When her remedies work, she is a blessing. When they fail, or when misfortune strikes the village, a crop blight, a cattle sickness, a stillborn child, that suspicion can rapidly curdle into outright accusation. You, by seeking her out, have become entangled in her fate. The secret you share is a fragile thread, but it connects you inextricably. If you are accused, you will be pressured to name her as the one who gave you the potion. If she is accused of cursing a neighbor's cow, her accusers might search her hut, find her stores of dangerous herbs, and use them as proof of her malevolent craft. Your own race and illness could then be used as further evidence against her. You are both trapped in a web of mutual vulnerability. The great European witch hunts, the burning times that will scar the consciousness of a future age, have not yet reached their frenzied peak. But all the ingredients are there. The belief in malefic IU and the power of certain individuals to cause harm through supernatural means is deeply ingrained in the popular imagination. The Church, while sometimes acting as a moderating force, is also increasing demonic influence. A trial for witchcraft is not like the manor court. It is a terrifying ordeal, a machine designed to produce confessions. You might be warped, forced to walk back and forth for days without rest until you collapse from exhaustion and confess to anything. You might be swum, bound hand and foot and thrown into a river. If you float, it's proof the water, the pure element, is rejecting you, and you are a witch. If you sink and drown, you are innocent. A posthumous acquittal is of little comfort. The most insidious technique is the search for the witch's mark or devil's mark. This was believed to be a spot on the body where the devil had branded his servant. A witch finder, often a self-appointed and paid professional, would use a long pin to prick your body, searching for this spot. An extra nipple, a large mole, a strange scar, any physical anomaly could be interpreted as the mark. Given the lack of hygiene, a small, localized infection from the pricking could cause a loss of sensation, proving your guilt. Historians continue to debate the complex causes of the witch craze. Was it a form of social control? A way for patriarch IS to suppress female healers and midwives who held knowledge and power outside of official structures? Was it a manifestation of mass hysteria, fueled by famine, plague, and religious upheaval? Was it simply a convenient way to eliminate social deviance and scapegoat the unfortunate? The answer is likely a messy combination of all these things. What is clear is that women were disproportionately the victims, and women who dealt in the knowledge of the body, of childbirth, of healing, of contraception and abortion were uniquely vulnerable. Their knowledge was power. It was a secret, female-centric power that operated outside the control of the male-dominated church and state, and that made it threatening. Elara, with her garden of dangerous herbs and her whispered consultations, is the archetypal target. A sudden violent cry, more powerful than any before it, rips a strangled cry from your throat. You press your face into the straw mattress, praying no one heard. The pain is a red-hot poker in your belly. In this moment of agony, you understand how a woman on the rack, or at the end of a witch-finder's pin, could confess to anything. To flying on a broomstick, to consorting with demons, to cursing her neighbor's fields. Anything to make the pain stop. The line between wise woman and witch is not drawn by the woman herself. It is drawn by her community. It depends on her successes and failures, on the gratitude or grievances of her neighbors, on the piety or paranoia of the local priest. Elara lives her life walking this tightrope. And by visiting her, by accepting her forbidden knowledge, you have stepped onto that same tightrope with her. The wind is picking up, and the long drop into the fire is suddenly terrifyingly visible. The night of agony eventually gives way to a grey, misty dawn. The tea has done its work. You are weak, drained, and hollowed out, but you are alive. The immediate crisis is over. You clean yourself as best you can, hiding the evidence of your ordeal, and stumble through the motions of the morning, your body a symphony of aches. As you move through your chores in a fog of exhaustion and residual pain, You wonder what would a real doctor have done. The thought is almost absurd. A physician is a figure as remote and inaccessible to you as the king himself. They are men of the cities, of the wealthy merchant houses and the noble courts. They would no more attend to a serf's wife than the lord would till his own fields. But still, you wonder, what does their vaunted, book-learned knowledge have to say about your condition? If you could somehow gain an audience with one of these learned men, you would enter a world that is strikingly different from Elara's hut, yet in some ways, just as strange. He would not ask about your fears or the number of mouths you have to feed. He would approach your problem as a scientific puzzle, a question of humoral imbalance. His first diagnostic tool would be to examine your urine. Uroscopy, the detailed visual inspection of urine, was a cornerstone of medieval medicine. He would pour a sample into a special glass flask, hold it up to the light, and assess its color, clarity, and sediment. He might even taste it. The urine was seen as a window into the state of the body's humus. A dark, cloudy urine might indicate an excess of black bile, for example. He would consult a complex chart, a sort of color wheel of urine, to make his diagnosis. He would also take your pulse, but not just to measure its speed. He would assess its quality using a vocabulary that would sound like poetry to you. Is the pulse bounding, scurrying, gazelle-like? Each quality indicated a different internal state. After his examination, his advice would likely be a world away from LRS. He would speak of diet. He might prescribe foods considered drying and heating to counteract the cold and moist state of your womb. He might suggest you avoid fish cold and wet and eat more roasted meats hot and dry. His pharmacy would be more complex and expensive than Elara's garden. He would use imported spices like pepper and ginger, believed to have powerful heating properties. He might prescribe a concoction of ground-up gemstones or precious metals, whose value was thought to correspond to their medical potency. And then there would be bleeding. Flabberté was the go-to treatment for almost any ailment. It was the most direct way to remove an excess humor from the body, specifically an excess of blood. The physician would consult a detailed astrological chart to determine the best day and time to bleed you, and a diagram of the body showing which vein corresponded to which organ. He would then make a small incision with a lancet and drain a prescribed amount of blood into a bowl. The theory was that by removing the bad, blood balance could be restored. But what would he say about your actual specific problem? Here, the official medical world was deeply conflicted. The same foundational texts from Hippocrates and Galen that informed the physician's practice also contained descriptions of abortifacient herbs. The knowledge was there in the books. However, the Hippocratic Oath, the ethical guidepost for physicians, contained a famous and explicit prohibition: I will not give to a woman an abortive remedy. So the physician was caught in a triangle between his medical knowledge, his ethical code, and the laws of the church and state. A respectable, university-trained doctor would almost certainly refuse to help you directly. To do so would be to risk his reputation, his license, and his soul. He might offer treatments to regulate your humors or restore your menstrual balance, using language that was deliberately ambiguous. He might prescribe a powerful purgative that could, as a side effect, induce a miscarriage, giving him plausible deniability. This is a point of subtle historical debate. Did physicians use this therapeutic ambiguity as a way to quietly help women without technically breaking their oath? Or were they genuinely focused on humoral balance, with any resulting miscarriage being an unintended, if sometimes welcome, consequence? The truth is likely impossible to uncover. In a way, the physician's position isn't so different from LRS. Both possess dangerous knowledge. Both operate under a set of powerful constraints. But the physician's constraints are those of official doctrine and professional reputation. LRS are those of secrecy, folklore, and the constant threat of being branded a witch. He works in the light, cloaked in the authority of Latin texts and academic robes. She works in the shadows, her authority derived from a lineage of whispered secrets. He is science, she is magic. But the line between them is far blurrier than either would be willing to admit. And in the end, for all his charts and theories, the physician's refusal would have sent you right back to a LRS store anyway. His world is not built for you. You slowly regain your strength over the next few days. The physical ordeal is over, but it has been replaced by a quiet, gnawing guilt and a lingering fear of discovery. You move about your life, tending the fire, mending clothes, preparing the thin pottage, all with a new and terrible secret locked behind your eyes. One afternoon, you see her, the lady of the manor, riding out from the castle on a fine white horse, accompanied by 2 attendants. She is a world away from you. Her gown is made of deep blue velvet, a color so rich and vibrant it seems to suck the light from the air. The sleeves are lined with fur. A delicate, jeweled net contains her hair. She is beautiful, ethereal, and as remote as a star. As she passes, her gaze sweeps over the village, over you, with an expression of complete indifference. You are part of the landscape, no more significant than a cow or a tree. And you wonder, does she ever face this fear? Does a woman who wants for nothing, who has servants to attend to her every need and a physician to consult for every ailment, ever lie awake at night dreading see? The answer is yes, but her problems and her solutions are entirely different from yours. The pressures on a high-born lady are, in some ways, even more intense. For you, another child is an economic disaster. For her, the stakes are dynastic. Her primary, and often sole, purpose in life is to produce a male heir. Her entire value is tied to her womb. A barren wife could be set aside, repudiated, and sent in shame to a convent, her marriage annulled by the church. Her failure to produce a son could plunge a kingdom into a succession crisis and civil war. But conversely, a noble woman might also have powerful reasons to want to avoid pregnancy. An affair with a courtier or a knight could lead to a bastard child, a scandal that would mean her absolute ruin. Or perhaps she is simply weary of the constant, life-threatening cycle of pregnancy and childbirth. Even with the best care available, childbirth is a deadly gamble. Many a noble line has been ended by a mother dying in the birthing bed. When a lady of the manor wants to control her fertility, she does not sneak off to a smoky hut on the edge of the woods. The forbidden knowledge comes to her, discreetly, through different channels. Her lady-in-waiting might procure a recipe from a well-traveled merchant. Her personal physician, despite his Hippocratic oath, might be persuaded by a hefty bag of gold or the subtle threat of his patron's displeasure to provide an emmenagogue, a potion to regulate her courses, with a wink and a nod. The remedies she has access to are more refined and exotic. Instead of local herbs like rue and tansy, her potions might contain expensive imported spices like saffron or myrrh, both of which had ancient reputations as abortifacients. The belief was that their expense and rarity correlated with their potency. She would also have greater access to the scientific methods. A physician might counsel her on the safe times of the month to engage in relations, based on the flawed humoral theories of fertility. This is an early and wildly inaccurate version of the rhythm method. He might also have access to written texts, perhaps a smuggled copy of an Arabic medical treatise that described more complex herbal compounds, or even rudimentary barrier method. The class divide is a chasm. Your choice is between starvation and a potentially lethal folk remedy. Her choice is between a physician's ambiguous treatment and a potion made from expensive imported goods. If your remedy fails and you sicken, you might die alone on your straw pallet. If her remedy fails and she sickens, her physician will bleed her, purge her, and surround her with every available comfort, all while reassuring her husband that everything is being done. This disparity is a source of constant tension and debate for social historians. Did these two worlds, the elite medicine of the court and the folk medicine of the village, ever interact? It's likely they did in subtle ways. A servant girl in the castle might overhear the ladies talking and bring a piece of gossip or a half-understood recipe back to her village. A traveling peddler who sold herbs to Ilara might also sell his more expensive wares at the castle gate. The knowledge flowed, not freely, but in trickles across the great divide of class. But the fundamental difference remains. For you, this is a matter of survival. For the lady on the white horse, it is a matter of strategy, of preserving power and reputation. Her risks are great, but her resources are far greater. She looks at you and sees a beast of burden. You look at her and see a woman trapped in a velvet cage. Both of you are prisoners of your biology, bound by the expectations of your world. The chains that hold you are made of iron and poverty. Hers are made of gold and lineage, but they are chains nonetheless. Years pass. The memory of that terrible night and the agonizing days that followed has faded, not gone, but smoothed over by the relentless rhythm of seasons and survival. You have had other children since. One, a boy sturdy and strong. The fear of another mouth to feed was still there, but your family was more established. Your eldest son's labor a real contribution. You faced the pregnancies with a grim resignation. Your secret act of defiance a distant, one-time rebellion. Your children grow. Your daughter marries a boy from a neighboring village. One day she comes to you, her face pale, her eyes wide with the same fear you remember so well. She is newly married, her husband's family is poor, and she is already pregnant. She asks you what to do, and in that moment you are faced with a profound choice. Do you pass the knowledge on? Do you send her down the path to Larae's hut? You hesitate. The world is changing, subtly but surely. The priest in the village is a younger man, now a zealot, full of fire and a burning desire to stamp out the pagan superstitions of the older generation. He preaches with a new ferocity against the cunning folk. Elara herself is long dead. Her garden has been overgrown with weeds for years. Her hut collapsed into a mound of earth and rotting thatch. Who holds the knowledge now? Did she pass it on to an apprentice? Or did it die with her? This is the great fragility of all tradition. The library of whispers, the knowledge passed from woman to woman, is incredibly vulnerable. It relies on an unbroken chain of memory. A single link breaks, a woman dies before she can teach her daughter. A family moves away. A generation decides the old ways are too dangerous and a piece of knowledge can be lost forever. Unlike the physician's knowledge, which is preserved in durable manuscripts, copied by monks, and stored in university libraries, Elara's knowledge is written on the wind. Her pharmacopoeia was not in a book, it was in the living plants of her garden and the complex map of memory in her mind. When she died, the library burned down. This loss of knowledge is a recurring theme in the history of folk medicine. The rise of centralized states, the increasing power of the church, and later, the professionalization of medicine all worked to suppress and discredit these traditional systems of healing. The wise woman was slowly replaced by the university-trained, state-licensed male physician. The midwife who once held a position of respect and authority in her community was gradually stripped of her autonomy, forced to operate under the supervision of doctors who often understood less about the practical realities of childbirth than she did. The great witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries would accelerate this process dramatically. In some regions of Europe, the persecution was so intense that it effectively wiped out generations of female folk healers. Accusation was easy, and the possession of herbs or a reputation for healing could be a death sentence. It became safer to not know. It became safer to forget. The knowledge was driven so far underground that in many places it vanished completely. Historians and folklorists are still trying to piece it all back together, engaged in a kind of historical archaeology. They sift through old court records, looking for descriptions of confiscated herbs. They analyze folk chases of forgotten beliefs. They compare the folk medicine of one region with another, trying to reconstruct the lost continent of women's health knowledge. It is a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. So you look at your daughter, at her desperate, pleading face. What can you tell her? You remember the names of the plants: rue, tansy, penurial. But could you identify them with certainty in the wild? Could you distinguish the life-saving wild carrot from its deadly cousin, poison hemlock, which looks hauntingly similar to the untrained eye? Do you remember the dosage? Was it 1 pinch or 2? A tea made from the flower or the leaf? The memory is a blur of pain and terror. The details that mean the difference between life and death are fuzzy, uncertain. To pass on this degraded, incomplete knowledge would be an act of profound irresponsibility. It would be like giving her a map where half the roads led off a cliff. And so you say nothing. You tell her to pray. You tell her to have faith in God. You give her the official answer, the safe answer, the answer that protects you both from the priest and the law. The answer that lets the fragile, dangerous, and vital knowledge of your mother's generation die. In your silence, a library turns to dust. The chain is broken. The secret knowledge, which flowed like a river through time, has hit a dam. You have made the sensible, rational, and safe choice. And it feels like a terrible betrayal. You are an old woman now. You sit by the fire, your hands gnarled with arthritis. Your world shrunk to the confines of this small hut. Your husband is gone, resting in the churchyard. Your children are grown, with families of their own, scattered across the manor. You are a grandmother, a great-grandmother even. The world you were born into is fading. The lord of the manor is a new man, from a new family. He is interested in new farming techniques, in wool production, in cash. The old feudal bonds of labor and loyalty are slowly, imperceptibly, being replaced by rents and wages. Life is still hard, brutal in many ways, but the texture of it is changing. Sometimes a traveling preacher will pass through the village, a new kind of religious man, one who speaks not of saints and relics, but of a direct and personal relationship with God. He talks of scripture, of reading the Bible for oneself, a revolutionary idea, in a world where the word of God has always been mediated by a priest. These are the first faint tremors of a great earthquake that will one day be called the Reformation. From your quiet corner by the fire, you watch these changes and you reflect. You think about the secret you have carried for a lifetime, the night of the bitter tea, the choice you made, and you realize that your story, your small, desperate act in the dark, is not just a personal memory. It is a part of a much larger and truly timeless human story. It is the story of the struggle for bodily autonomy. The desire to control one's own body, to decide for oneself when and if to bear children, is not a modern invention. It is not a product of feminism or of the 20th century. It is an ancient, fundamental human impulse. You didn't have the words for it. You would never have spoken of reproductive rights or bodily autonomy. You would have framed it in the language of survival, of necessity, of having one too many mouths to feed, but the core desire was the same. The forces arrayed against you were immense. The church, the state, the crushing weight of tradition, the limitations of your own knowledge, all of it conspired to deny you that choice. And yet, you sought it anyway. You defied the priest, you risked the Lord's law, you gambled with your own life, all for a small measure of control over your own destiny. The struggle is a constant thread running through human history. The specific methods change. The sea sponge and the weasel testicle are replaced by vulcanized rubber. The dangerous herbal potions are replaced by hormonal pills, meticulously engineered in a laboratory. The legal and religious frameworks shift. But the fundamental tension remains. It is the tension between the individual's desire for self-determination and the society's interest in controlling reproduction. Historians and ethicists will argue about this for centuries. Where does life begin? Who has the right to decide? What is the proper balance between individual freedom and societal good? These questions are not new. They were present in your smoky hut, in Alara's overgrown garden, in the university halls where physicians debated the Hippocratic Oath, and in the confessionals where priests probed for the sin of Onan. Your life was a microcosm of this epic struggle. You navigated a world of competing knowledge systems, the theological, the legal, the medical, and the secret, female folk tradition. Each one offered you a different truth, a different set of rules, a different path to salvation or ruin. As you look into the glowing embers of the fire, you see the faces of the women in your life. Your mother, who taught you to fear God and obey your husband. Alara, who taught you the dangerous secrets of the earth. Your daughter, to whom you passed on your silence. You see a chain, not of knowledge but of choices, of struggles, of secrets kept and stories lost. Your personal story will never be recorded. Your name will not appear in any chronicle. You are one of the countless millions whose lives make up the vast, silent majority of history. But your struggle was real, and it was important. The echo of your desperate choice, the choice to brew a cup of bitter tea in the dead of night, reverberates through the ages. It is a quiet testament to the enduring, unstoppable human need to be the author of one's own life, and that is a story that will never ever end. The fire in the hearth has burned low. the last log collapsing into a soft, incandescent pile of embers. The hut is quiet, filled with the deep, settled silence of the very late night. Outside, a sliver of a crescent moon hangs in an inky black sky, casting a faint, silvery light on the sleeping world. You are back where we started, in the dark, but it's a different kind of darkness now. It's the gentle, pre-dawn quiet, full of the promise of a new day. You feel a profound sense of peace settle over you. The long, tumultuous journey through fear and desperation has led you here, to this moment of quiet reflection. You are no longer the young, tapped by her circumstances. You are not the agonized figure in the grip of herbal poison. You are not the guilt-ridden keeper of a terrible secret. You are simply here now in the quiet. In your hand, you hold a small, smooth stone you picked up from the riverbank years ago. You've kept it all this time, its cool weight of familiar comfort. But tonight, you imagine it is something else. You imagine it is the linen packer towel I gave you all those decades ago. You can almost feel the scratchy fabric, smell the faint, dusty scent of ruined tansy. What do you do with it? Do you throw it into the embers, a final symbolic act of renouncing that dangerous, forbidden knowledge? Do you watch it smolder and turn to ash, embracing the safety of the known world, the world of the priest and the prayer, the world you ultimately chose for your daughter? Do you accept that some doors are best left unopened, some knowledge too dangerous to possess? Or do you clutch it tightly in your hand, a secret talisman of a path not taken, a reminder of the power and the power that lies hidden just beneath the surface of the world? Do you honor the memory of Elara, the keeper of the garden, the woman who offered you a choice when you had none? Do you acknowledge the value of her rebellious, earthy wisdom, even if you were too afraid to fully embrace it? Or perhaps you do something else entirely. You open your hand. You look at the imaginary packet, at the choice it represents. You don't destroy it. You don't cling to it. You acknowledge the impossible situation you were in. You acknowledge the fear that drove you, the courage that it took to seek help, and the strength it took to survive the consequences. You forgive yourself. You forgive yourself for your desperation, for your fear, for your secret act of rebellion, and for your eventual, pragmatic retreat into silence. This is a point that historians, with their focus on grand narratives and societal forces, often miss: the quiet, internal resolution. History is not just what happens to people, it's also how they make sense of it afterward. It's about how they integrate their experiences, their traumas, and their choices into the story of their life. You chose survival. And you chose to protect your daughter, not with the dangerous, fragmented knowledge of a dying tradition, but with the shield of conformity. Was it the right choice? The question is meaningless. It was the choice of a survivor. It was a human choice, born of love and fear. You look around the small hut at the familiar shapes in the darkness. This is the life you made. It has been a life of hardship, of loss, of back-breaking labor, but it has also been a life of simple joys. The warmth of the fire, the taste of fresh-baked bread, the laughter of your grandchildren, the quiet companionship of your husband. It has been a full life. You did not have the power to change the world. You did not have the words to name your struggle, but you navigated the treacherous currents of your time with a quiet, tenacious strength. You made a choice in the dark, and you lived with it in the light. And in the end, perhaps that is the most profound kind of power there is. You unclench your hand, the stone cool against your palm. The first faint hint of dawn is beginning to lighten the edge of the sky. The night is over. You have made your peace. And so our journey through the medieval night comes to a close. The woman by the hearth, her story told, now recedes into the quiet mists of history, her struggles and her peace becoming a part of the long, silent river of time. Leave her there, in the soft glow of the dawn that was her future. Her world of shadows and whispers can fade now, becoming indistinct, like a landscape seen from a great, great distance, a story that has been folded up and put away on a dusty, forgotten shelf. Your own world now is just the quiet of your room, the gentle weight of your blanket, the soft, steady hum of the fan, a constant, soothing presence in the dark. There are no choices to be made tonight, no fears to be faced, only the simple, easy rhythm of your own breathing. Feel it low, Inhale and exhale. Let each breath be a small wave, washing away the last lingering thoughts of the day, leaving the shore of your mind smooth and clear and ready for rest. The story is now a dream you are already beginning to forget. Its details soften, its edges blur, and all that remains is a feeling of stillness, a sense of a long journey completed. Allow that stillness to deepen, to pull you down into the soft, welcoming depths of sleep, where the darkness is a warm and gentle blanket. There is nothing left to do but to drift, to float on that quiet, peaceful current toward a place of deep and untroubled rest. The end of the article. Good night.